Welcome to this week's Talking Europe debate on France 24. I'm Catherine Nicholson at the European Parliament in Brussels. Now, we are all used to audacious statements from Donald Trump, but in the last couple of days, the US president has hit France very much where it hurts, threatening to slap higher tariffs on imports of French wine into the US. Mr. Trump told American journalists that French wines can reach American shops for nothing, adding, "It's not fair and we'll do something about it." Well, the US and EU are gearing up for major trade talks. So is this all getting off on the wrong foot, or is it a storm in a wine glass? With me to debate this are two members of the European Parliament who are freshly elected newcomers, starting with Svenja Hahn from Germany's FDP Liberal Party. Hello there.
Hello, Catherine.
Hi, and you're with the Liberals group, which has just got a new name as well, Renew Europe.
Yes, we just rebranded ourselves for our agenda to renew Europe, to inspire citizens to move European Union forward.
OK, so we'll see where this group is taking things. Also with us, Mikuláš Peksa, who's one of the first ever Czech Pirate Party MEPs to join the EU Parliament. Hello there.
Hello.
And you've just joined the European Greens group as well.
That's true. We forged this alliance in order to get greater influence on the EU affairs.
OK, so we'll also bring in our outside expert as well, someone who was named one of the 20 most influential women in Brussels, Shada Islam, who's from the Friends of Europe think tank. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for calling me here, Catherine. Thank you.
Well, we're going to start off with a bit of an overview of just exactly what Donald Trump said and some other trade tiffs that Donald Trump has going between the US and other parts of the world. We'll watch this report together. It's from France 24's Naomi Lloyd.
French wine, the latest target of Donald Trump's trade war. The Gallic grapes are in his sights as the US president accuses France of creating unfair trade barriers for great American wine. The US charges a tariff from 5.3 to 14.9 cents per bottle for imported wine. EU tariffs range from 11 to 29 cents per bottle. As part of the EU, France doesn't set its own trade policy or tariffs, so any US measures against French wine would have to target the entire EU. Then there's the Mexican front. Trump says his threat to impose tariffs on Mexico last week encouraged the country to agree to stronger immigration enforcement.
It was all done because of the tariffs and because of the relationship that we have with Mexico.
And he predicts the strategy will be successful with China. Trade negotiations have stalled since talks broke down with Beijing in early May. The Trump administration raised tariffs to 25% on $200 billion of Chinese goods. Beijing responded by raising tariffs on $60 billion of US exports. On Monday, Trump threatened to slap further tariffs on Chinese goods if leader Xi Jinping doesn't meet him at the G20 in Japan at the end of the month.
We always have the option to raise it another $300 billion at 25%, and the 25% could be much higher than 25%.
Other countries in the line of fire for higher import duties include India, who Trump said earlier this month will lose its privileged trade status.
There we go. So Donald Trump clearly sees trade as a pretty forceful tool for leverage in foreign policy. As we know, he's already slapped steel and aluminium tariffs on the EU. There was quite the spat. Talk of trade war. Let's just start with the new French wine threat. Shada Islam, I'll come to you first. Do you believe that Donald Trump will go through with this threat of much higher tariffs for French wine?
We don't know. He's unpredictable, he's volatile, and he says something and could do something else. It depends on how Europe reacts. And if there is unity among all of the European Union countries on this issue, I think he may back off. But this will require agile, nimble negotiations from the European Union, all 27 of them. 28 at the moment still.
And of course, we have a much more fragmented political picture in the European Parliament since the elections. There's no real dominant group anymore in the Parliament. Mikuláš Peksa, if I come to you, do you believe that there will be unity in Europe?
Well, I think we should, first of all, search for such a unity, because this time it's French wine, but next time it can be German or Czech beer or Finnish vodka. So we really need to strive for unity. And if there will be measure from the other side, we have to retaliate appropriately.
Svenja, you said in your election material that you flag up world trade as a particular focus for yourself.
Yeah.
How far do you think the EU should be prepared to compromise with Donald Trump to try and get a beneficial trade deal or avoid these sort of punishment sort of tariffs?
Well, Mr. Trump's trade politics has been very symbolic. You mentioned the steel and aluminum tariffs. We had Spanish olives, now it's French wine. So you can see it's really about symbolic. So what we really must do is enter into a dialogue for now to remove the tariffs. But what we need to do in the long run is to find one common position that we as the European Union, with a strong mandate for the trade commissioner, negotiate with the EU, that we in the long run have a trade agreement. That is what really matters.
Now, Mikuláš, I know that your party, the Pirates, were strongly against the TTIP, the former transatlantic trade partnership that was being negotiated for all those years. Would you be in favour of finding the kind of deal that Svenja's talking about?
Let's think about the content. It's not that way that we would absolutely refuse any sort of free trade agreement. Let's talk about what's inside the free trade agreement. And if inside the free trade agreement there are things which clearly violate our consumer protection, our agriculture, then we should refuse it, of course. But this is up to the Commission to negotiate such a trade deal which will be acceptable for the European citizens.
You know, the thing is, Catherine, this has been tried before, right? This is not the first time that a transatlantic free trade deal has been, envisaged, right? It hasn't worked in the past either. And there has been public discontent, the fact that, there are worries about consumer protection being lowered. Those things haven't gone away. And under Donald Trump, those things have become worse, in fact. I mean, we've seen the furor in the UK over the NHS being part of any trade deal that post-Brexit Britain does with the Americans. So those concerns haven't gone away. And I would really recommend that instead of doing these bilateral deals, we try and bring this into the WTO, the World Trade Organization. Try and get multilateral rules that lower tariffs and make things more predictable and more secure for traders, exporters, businesses. At the moment, it's all volatile. One man, very transactional, very, very different, very turbulent, threatens, and people then sort of retreat and say, yes, we'll do your deal. I think we should be firm and united.
Well, the EU is currently taking the issue of the higher tariffs on Spanish olives that was brought in last year through the WTO. But the problem is perhaps that that's perhaps a backwards way of dealing with things, waiting for the WTO arbitration to carry on. It takes a very long time, surely.
I do think we need to talk about reforms of the WTO. I think they're necessary, and we see now that they're not functioning well enough. But I do think the EU has the mandate to negotiate trade agreements. In fact, I was one of the few back then demonstrating in favor of TTIP, because I do think that we need fair, value and rule-based trade agreements. And you've seen it with the trade agreement with Canada. There's a great potential to secure labor standards, security standards, environmental protection standards through trade agreement. In fact, as well, strengthening the Paris Agreement, if we agree on common standards on this. So I see a huge potential for trade agreements for this.
The WTO is broken. I totally agree with you. And, that's not just because of the US, not just because of China either, I insist. It's because the world has changed. And there are many emerging countries out there that do not accept rules that were set by others. They were rule takers, and now they want to be part of the rule-making process. And I think that's very good. So I'm really sort of suggesting here that we rethink the way we do multilateral trade and consider different countries in different ways. That setting has been, I think, eroded through time. So yes, let's reform the WTO, but let's do it in a coherent, consistent manner, talking to the Indias, the Brazils, the South Africas, and the Chinas of the world.
Well, carry on.
I just wanted to go to China, but I think you wanted to speak about it
wanted to bring it back to agriculture, in fact, because, Spanish olives, French wine, these are all agricultural products. And currently, the European Union is saying very, very strictly, we're not bringing agriculture into trade talks with the United States. Clearly, this is where Donald Trump is trying to attack. Mikuláš Peksa, do you believe that the European Union can hold firm on this in the face of a Donald Trump who seems quite determined?
I think we should focus on that because simply our agricultural sector is quite different from the American one. I think we prefer or tend to have small farms, which it's for historical reasons, but this is something which is part of our heritage and should be protected. I think that it's not a good idea to just directly put it on the same market with the big industrial farms.
So you believe that those smaller scale farms would be under threat?
Very much. That could be a huge threat, and I think we should really keep this approach so that that there remains plurality and diversity in our agricultural sector. This is very much important. I think we all can agree that we need kind of like capping for the agricultural subsidies. That's something which is quite.
I tend to disagree with you on this. Because we're accusing Mr. Trump of protectionism. And in fact, part of our agriculture policy is that as well. So we are creating barriers on our side as well. So but this is something we must solve on the EU side first. This is not something that we can solve in the negotiation with the United States. This is something we need to talk on the EU level, how we want to develop our agriculture policy and what does it mean for trade as well. Because with subsidies, we are creating barriers as well because we are supporting our industry.
But I think if I could just say, I mean, you're right, the CAP was an enormous expense for the European Union budget. That's been coming down. Subsidies are on their way out. The CAP is being reformed. Now, it's a slow process for the reasons that Nicolas talked about. There are many, many small farmers there that need that kind of support. There are many others who don't. Agriculture is also in the process of modernizing. We're talking about bioculture now, authentic, green things. Our consumers want different kinds of products, vegan products, clean products. Some of those standards are not applied in the United States, and that's the fear the UK has, UK citizens have.
Through agreement, we have the potential to agree on the standards.
But I do not see this current administration agreeing to any standards that will be acceptable to European consumers. We're very high standards, rightly so. And the world looks up to us for our consumers' protection standards. I don't think we should lower them just for the sake of an agreement.
I would not say we should lower our standards. I just do not think that it makes sense to, from the beginning, fully erase a part from potential negotiations. And it's not about lowering standards, it's about sharing standards and finding a common level.
OK, well, let's broaden this out, just looking at a bit more broadly at EU-US relations in the couple of minutes that remain to us in this very short programme. The US has, Donald Trump specifically has, in the last couple of days, attacked your country, Germany, once again, perhaps the country most attacked by Donald Trump, most directly. Peter Bayer, who's the German-US relations coordinator for Angela Merkel, said the public mood in Germany is to distance ourselves from the US. On the other hand, there's clearly an alliance that we saw in the D-Day commemorations, for example, and the US and European states are very linked in NATO. So where's this overall relationship going? Perhaps come to you, Svenja.
I think we must criticize what the Trump administration is doing, but we must be aware that this is not turning into blank anti-Americanism. Because I do think it is relevant that we keep up the dialogue, not only in trade, but in civil society, on foreign policy, on security, on defense, on all areas, because the United States still remain one of our most longest standing and valuable partner. So we must be very careful on that and never give up the dialogue on any level. But sometimes it's harder than other days.
Shada, I read a piece that you wrote recently where you said as the US turns inwards, the spotlight is on Europe as the standard bearer of the liberal order. Are things changing on this?
It is, and I think it's very good for Europe to be in that spotlight and for Europe to realize that over-dependency on any partner, and I agree that America is part of our DNA in Europe, long-standing partnership, but it's time, the world has changed, multipolar world, it's time to look out for other partners, and Europe really is doing that. I mean, Europe did that with Canada through trade, that's our first tool of choice, if you like. We've done it with Japan, we've done it with Korea, we're going to do it soon with the ASEAN countries. Relations with China are also in a good shape, I think, at the moment. So we're doing that. And Europe is in the spotlight. And I'm really pleased about it because for too long, we've sort of stood in America's shadow. It's time we came out. And on security as well, Catherine, we're talking about strategic autonomy. I think these are good, positive steps that I encourage European leaders to go ahead with.
Mikuláš, Mike Pompeo was recently in Europe and seemed particularly keen on visiting your part of Europe, the central nations. I think he went to the Czech Republic first, in fact, on his tour. where do you believe in terms of your region within Europe? Because Czech Republic is one of the Visegrad 4 states, which have at times stood apart from the old guard in Europe.
Well, I would not divide it based on the regions, but rather based on the opinions. I think there are definitely people in Visegrad countries who are strongly appreciating the current policies of American president. On the other hand, there are people who are maybe more critical and see opportunity for another politics, which is more heading to preserve our European interests. That's something we should always keep in mind because, as it was a couple of times mentioned previously, and the American president is quite promoting the American interests. So we should do the same in the case of Europe.
Okay, well, just one final point.
I think it's good that the European Union is stepping up its game and that we're more confident of ourselves. But we need to do more. We really need to speak with one voice on the world stage. And sometimes we're still struggling in that. So I think this will one of the greatest tasks for the next mandate of the Commission of the Parliament.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for joining in with this debate, this discussion about EU-US relations. That is the end of the programme, but I'd like to thank you all, Shada Islam, Mikuláš Peksa and Sven Johan. Thank you all so much, and thank you to our 2 new MEPs as well, who's starting your mandate right here. Thanks you as well for watching. We hope to see you soon here on France 24 for another edition of Talking Europe.